Welcome to the Wednesday, February 22nd edition of the PFF Forecast. We are in full XFL/off-season mode. We are entering the dog days of free agency. And so we're going to talk a little free agency. We're going to talk a little Lamar. Got Seth Galina and Judah Fortgang on the pod today. We're going to talk a little betting, what to do during the offseason. We're going to get Judah Fortgang's take, see how many correlated parlays he cooks up during the offseason, which sports they are, and get the download on that so we can feed ourselves during the dog or the dead months. It's going to be a great episode. Let's rock. I'm trying really hard to channel my inner Galina here. What do you think of the beard?
It's better than Brad's, and that's really that's the Brad is the Mendoza line.
Okay,
so you're above the Mendoza line, so you're cooking.
I might get that tattooed. Better than Brad.
It's like a 62, and I think Seth's saying I'm at like a 44.8 over here. So that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Look, we can't all be Aaron Donald. We're not all blessed like yourself.
My beard has been consistently 92.8, over 90.0 for the past 7 years. So yeah.
Do you use Manscaped beard oil? What do you do?
I do not. This is au naturel.
Wow. It's just the Canadian air. That's what it is.
Genetics, baby. Canadian air and genetics.
Yeah, you could go to East Palestine and your beard would turn into like eight-legged frogs and stuff like that. That'd be a lot of fun. All right, let's talk football here. Lamar Jackson. There are three quarterbacks, I should say, that people are talking about pretty consistently. Maybe four if you throw in Aaron Rodgers in the tomb of darkness. But it's Daniel Jones requesting can't even say it with a straight face, $45 million a year. It's Lamar Jackson and it's Derek Carr. And we have to talk about one of them. So it sure as hell isn't going to be Derek Carr or Daniel Jones. We're going to talk about Lamar Jackson. And so let's start with this, Brad. Why don't you refresh us? Like, where do things stand? What are the options for Lamar and for the Ravens, I should say?
Yeah. So, it's still going back to last offseason where it's not necessarily about the total value, the average value each year. It's really coming down to the fully guaranteed money at signing. And Lamar Jackson is pointing to another contract in his division, that being, of course, Deshaun Watson with the Cleveland Browns. To put into context, his deal, obviously people know is crazy, but $230 million fully guaranteed at signing. The second highest ever is Aaron Rodgers at $101.5 million. So he has more than double the most fully guaranteed dollars at the time of signing. And it's very notable that we hear these rumblings that every owner's pissed off about it. Only one owner actually went on camera to reporters and said, I really wish this player didn't get this deal. I really wish this didn't happen. This precedent is a bad precedent. That owner was Ravens owner Steve Bisciotti, maybe thinking about his pending negotiation. So as it stands today, Baltimore is probably offering a deal that, again, average value-wise, any other metric you want to look at, is probably within a range that Lamar's fine with. But they're just simply at this time not going to go into that range of $230 million fully guaranteed. And if you're Lamar Jackson, you say, he's in my division. I have an MVP. He does not. I am a good person in a lot of other facets as well. So I have every reason. Yeah, we'll just, I don't know. I have every reason to ask for this money, and I don't really care that it's not your precedent or yada, yada, yada. And so I'll tell you this, like, there is not a lot of optimism that either side's going to budge from that stance. And if they don't, and it goes to a franchise tag, by the way, the deadline is March 7th for a franchise tag. I think it's more realistic than people maybe realize that he is tagged and then ultimately traded before the July 15th deadline to sign that multi-year extension that someone else will give him.
And by tag, there's two tags that they could place, right? There's the exclusive, which is a $45 million guaranteed contract for this season. And then there's a non-exclusive, which was a 32.5. And if another team comes in and signs him, they would then ship 2 first-round picks over to the Ravens.
Correct. Whereas the exclusive, they would be able to dictate those trade terms. That's why everyone thinks it's going to be exclusive, because realistically, you should get more than just 2 firsts for Lamar Jackson.
Right. Does the exclusive tag, does it signal one way or the other? So if they put the exclusive tag on him, does it make you think they're going to trade him? Because 45 million guaranteed is like a stone's throw away from what, he's asking for, which is fully guaranteed in the 50 million range.
Yeah, I mean, I think to a degree, it's more just about thinking that, look, someone is going to sign him to an offer sheet that you're probably not going to match. So it's like you kind of have to do that. You look at historically, Dak Prescott got exclusive tags. Kirk Cousins' second one was exclusive. Typically, only you see at quarterback, because other positions, a team's really rarely going to give 2 first-round picks for a franchise tag player, because more often than not, franchise tag guys are kind of not the early extension elite guys. They're kind of just below that. Your Orlando Browns and so on and so forth, where the team isn't really fully bought in yet. So yeah, I don't know if it's a huge signal, but end of the day, the tag coming and there's still just being no progress on talks, is not a great sign.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay,
from the Ravens. Sorry, I want to ask Brad, from the Ravens' perspective, is this both? Is it one thing where it's, hey, we just can't give all this guaranteed money. That's just too much money. Or is it that plus we don't think he's worth it? We don't think he's at this tier 1 caliber quarterback, et cetera, et cetera.
It's a great question. So the interesting thing, the fact that it's Baltimore, is that they actually historically have been very aggressive in fully guaranteeing a lot of money, or giving the most total guarantees to their players. Like, the percentage of contracts they give out that are guaranteed is actually higher than other teams on their top deals, like Mark Andrews, Marlon Humphrey, Ronnie Stanley. Go down the list. So it's kind of interesting. It's them. I think it maybe is a blend, but I would say it more is just, we don't want to set the precedent that we're going to be the next team that gives fully guaranteed deal, over 3 years. Kirk Cousins 3-year deal in Minnesota being fully guaranteed, I think was okay, because a lot of teams give 3 years of quarterback deals fully guaranteed. It's then pushing out into 4 and 5 years. I think that's the bigger issue. But hey, maybe if he was Patrick Mahomes, maybe they would do it. But I think it's more about the contract precedent than the player.
So here's a question on that, because I was going to ask the same thing, sort of. Someone's going to get a fully guaranteed deal of this caliber again at some point. It's just bound to happen. Is that Mahomes? The next deal that he gets?
So I'll say this. I do think we're going to see a new Mahomes contract this offseason, if not next offseason. I don't know, though. I mean, I think to a degree, if you get cash flows that are favorable for the player, they don't necessarily need these fully guarantees way out. The reason why we saw it in this case was just because the Browns probably realized, unless we offer this, we're not getting this player. It was such a unique circumstance where you had a guy that, because of his no trade clause, was just dictating the terms. The incumbent team obviously didn't want him. The reason I would say no is because, the Ravens could just tag him twice and just say, you know what, we'll call your bluff. If you want to go Kirk Cousins route, that's fine. But that's why. So with Mahomes, no, but I think he'll just get a large cash inflow in the near future.
That makes sense. Seth, as you think about this from the Lamar Jackson player perspective, Greg Roman out in Baltimore, who their weapons are next year, assuming they pick no one up, is not particularly exciting. Where, if you're Lamar, do you want to go?
I mean, I think, not to get all too much into his own brain, but you probably want to stay. I think that's probably at the end of the day, you feel like you're starting somewhere, you've built something, did win an MVP, you have been to the playoffs. This was, I've said this throughout the whole year, but this is a really good football team this year. Until the injuries started happening, a lot of bad luck, to lose some games. This is a very elite football team. So I don't know why you would want to leave. Obviously, the money is going to push him in one direction or another. So if I was him, and I'd probably say the same thing about Rodgers, where it's I probably want to stay because you feel good about the relationships you've built in the building at this point. So why now? You are Lamar Jackson. You are going to be the king wherever you go. You can build. People will people will become friendly with you wherever you go. But I think, you've lived your early life here, your early 20s here in Baltimore, in this building with, everyone talks about Harbaugh being one of the best kind of like coaches in the league in terms of the stability that he brings. Obviously, you're getting a new offensive coordinator this year, so I probably would want to stay, but like I said, the money will dictate that.
And as far as like if it's not Baltimore, okay. So let's say that Baltimore and things just go completely south. You're then looking at potential trade candidates. It's going to be someone that's going to give up a lot. So they're not going to have a ton of assets left over. Lamar is not, this shouldn't come out the wrong way. He's not your normal quarterback, right? You need to build a scheme that takes advantage of what he does uniquely well. Where and who is best prepared to do that?
Well, I think the first thing I'll say is, and I always bring this point up when we talk about this scheme issue with certain quarterbacks. And I don't remember the name of the quarterback who was starting in Houston, Deshaun Watson's rookie year. I'm sure one of you will remember. But anyways, he started, I think, 4 games, something like that. And then Deshaun came, and he wasn't good or he got injured. And then Deshaun came in, and all of a sudden, Bill O'Brien was the OC and the head coach and the play caller at that time. So Deshaun comes in, and all of a sudden the offense is completely different. They're just using all these cool things you can do with the player with the kind of unique ability that Deshaun Watson has. So to me, it's like, hey, we can build this thing out of Lamar with whoever we have, because he is such a unique player and a unique talent and an elite quarterback that we can build it out of anything. Now, with that said, obviously, like there are some places that, obviously are going to have pieces, I think, from a personnel standpoint that look good. And I think the Falcons are probably the best looking team, because you have the receivers that Lamar Jackson hasn't had. Let's say the offensive line is a wash. They've had good offensive lines with the Ravens. The Falcons look pretty good this year. Whether it was a 1-year thing or we'll see, but they look pretty good this year. Running back play, Algier had a good year. They can figure out the running back situation, but the having Pitts and Drake London, and even like Zacchaeus, who's a really good number 3, like that to me is interesting for Lamar. Now you could even we talk about the scheme thing too, because you look at what Arthur Smith has done in his past. That offense looks a lot like what you can do with Lamar that we've seen in Baltimore, that they did with Mariota. A little less so with Ritter, different type of quarterback, but they're running all the option stuff you want for Lamar, and he's really good. Like Arthur Smith is really good. In the run game, would be, I think, importantly, and we saw it with Tennessee too, is his play action development in how to get guys open down the field off play action is like second to none in the league. Really smart play designer, understanding, when to call the plays, the sequencing of the plays to get guys open, top notch. That's going to help Lamar. Now, I do think Todd Monken coming in there to replace Greg Roman, I think that's a good match for him in Baltimore, which you just say there. But Atlanta, I mean, that's a match made in heaven. It is. It's really, really good out there with what they can do. I mean, you can talk about the Giants as well, obviously propping up Daniel Jones the way they did this year.
Hey,
you think, hey, what can we do with a guy like Lamar Jackson? The homer in me says, go get him, New Orleans Saints. I know that's not going to happen, but I would love it. But yeah, Atlanta really has all the pieces in place. And I think this goes back to who is Lamar? I think this is always the question. For some reason, he gets talked about in ways that I don't think he should get talked about. He's never had a receiver at all that's worked well with him. A top-notch elite tier 1 receiver, and it's hard to find these elite quarterbacks without it. Mahomes came into the league with 2 elite receivers. So did Joe Burrow, basically. Josh Allen became that guy with 1 elite receiver. He's never had that. And you could also make the argument that I'm not ready to make the argument quite yet, but the Greg Roman offense limited them in ways that made them a worse offense. It made them a good running offense, but it might not have made them a great offense overall. And so to the way we talk about Lamar, and is he worth it? Of course he's worth it. And I find it absolutely insane to think that the Baltimore Ravens could not be with Lamar Jackson for the rest of his career or the next 5 years or whatever. This is too good of a quarterback. It is way too good of a quarterback for him to ever leave Baltimore. So yeah, that's why Lamar Jackson he's too good, and he should never leave Baltimore. But if he does, the Atlanta Falcons are a great spot for him.
And just real quick, because you mentioned your Saints, but also Atlanta, when Deshaun Watson was up and doing his, visits and all that, both of those teams were in the mix, and they obviously didn't get the deal done, but they were probably entertaining the idea of giving a deal, at least in the realm of what he ultimately got. So in particular, Atlanta, I'll tell you, I mean, Arthur Blank wants to spend money. Like, the guy wants to pay players, have a great show, entertain fans, all that. So everything you just mentioned on the football field, you add in everything else around that off the field, I think also is just a slam dunk fit for his talent.
You mentioned too, all teams that are in the NFC, and the AFC right now is an absolute gauntlet. And I think one of the reasons that Lamar doesn't get his due, to be clear, is that everyone's busy talking about Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, and there's nothing wrong with those guys, Herbert as well. I mean, those guys are obviously all amazing. But, someone's got to go to the NFC. I mean, the NFC stinks, and particularly the NFC South. So both New Orleans and Atlanta, I get that it'd be hard to leave Baltimore. I don't know. I think he should. I maybe that, it's probably going to anger some people out there, but I think he should. I think Atlanta is a great fit. I think that'd be phenomenal. I think that town, that city, I should say, their fan base, the Ravens fan base is great. Atlanta's fan base is awesome. And guess what? They have receivers who you can name. So, in addition to a great tight end, Mark Andrews, obviously a great tight end. I think everyone believes Kyle Pitts could be great as well. And you would immediately be a contender in a really, really weak conference. What would it take though, Brad? Let's say that they exclusive franchise tag him. What type of a deal are we talking?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're looking at 3 firsts and then, multiple day 2 picks or, some players like we saw with Russell Wilson where they put players in instead of picks in certain situations. We mentioned the Giants. Like, do you try to flip Daniel Jones back to them? Are they interested? Probably not. Maybe not. We don't know there. But, just for the sake of conversation, like, let's say it's the Jets. Like, do you try to get someone out of the Jets? Like, do you, or whatever the case may be, are you more interested at a certain degree in a player than a pick? But yeah, it's 3 firsts and multiple day 2 picks. And for people that don't know, because I have seen some of these mock trades out there, you can't trade more than 3 years into the future. So unless a team has multiple first round picks, the most they could give is 3 first round picks. But yeah, it would be probably the biggest trade package of all time, frankly, or at least in the modern era.
I think I'd rather have like just a good New York bagel with lox than Daniel Jones.
I had a New York bagel with lox yesterday, so I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, they're great.
It was delightful.
A nice slice of pizza, but like, please, God, no, not Daniel Jones. So I guess with that in mind, like, Seth, if you think about that and you go, okay, here's where Atlanta's at right now. You give all that up. They're not by any means a made team. Are they a contender? Like, what do you think about that?
I think you're a contender if you have Lamar Jackson on your team. I think he's that good. So yeah, I do. Can I add something here? The quarterback who played in front of Deshaun Watson to start the 2017 season with the Houston Texans, who got benched in the first half. Tom Savage.
Great athlete. Yeah.
You were legend, Tom Savage.
Talking poorly of his athleticism earlier. I was gonna say, you don't think he's quite the athlete of Deshaun? That's a hot take out of you, Seth.
They become contenders like right off the bat with Lamar Jackson. Obviously, you wouldn't be giving up like a London and a Pitts. Like that would have to be there. And like, you're not going to give back like a Chris Lindstrom, who's like a really great guard. You know what I mean? Like, so like you still have the pieces in place that, and like, look, they have to rebuild the defense anyways. Like, you take whoever you want on that defense. Like, it doesn't really matter.
Besides AJ Terrell,
I guess. Yeah. So that's like maybe not AJ Terrell. Basically anyone else. So like, yeah, you're a contender right away. You can tell how I feel about Lamar Jackson. I think he's unfairly criticized in a lot of ways. I think he's an elite quarterback. And I think we would see that in Atlanta with those players and with Arthur Smith, who I think is a really good play caller.
And I would just say real quick on Atlanta, like they've basically purged their entire roster the last 2 off seasons. Like they didn't tank or anything like that, but they've just intentionally not been good effectively for 2 years because they just had to get rid of all these bad contracts. Like, can they afford it? Yes. Like, can they, of course, not having draft picks hurts. You don't get those surplus value players and all that, but they are in a positioned well to make it work if they did, pull off this blockbuster.
And you think Arthur Blank would just be like, I'm going to give you a fully guaranteed contract? Like, screw it.
I think if you maybe make a short list of owners that would be willing to do it, I think he's top 3 on that list. I really do.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the more that we talk about it, the more I think it could happen. Just because it makes a lot of sense. It'd be super interesting to see like the reaction on the Baltimore side though, because I mean, you don't see those quarterbacks walk. And would it be a trend that we see continue? Or, we saw this in the NBA, right? Where players were like, I'm going to dictate the terms. I'm going to go where I want to go. And by and large, we haven't seen that really happen in the NFL. This would be kind of like that. Seth, we're going to play a quick game before we get onto your pet peeve. I'm going to name quarterbacks. You're going to tell me where to stop because Lamar Jackson should be in front of this player.
Ooh.
Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Justin. Okay.
Ooh.
All right.
I don't think it's not even like I think they're in the same tier. Like I wouldn't want to put either ahead of either. Mm-hmm. I just think, and I keep saying, we cannot separate Joe Burrow from Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. Like these are all like you have literally the number one, basically the best wide receiver 1, you have the best wide receiver 2, and you have the best wide receiver 3 in the league. Like you cannot separate these two. You also, the narrative about him exists because Lou Anarumo went on a run in the playoffs last year. You know what I mean? So it's like, hey, how can we separate that? Love Burrow. Like I said, I don't think he's better or worse. I think they're in the same tier. But I think those are the discussions that keep us these rankings keep us from actually having good discussions about these players. But look, I still think Mahomes is the best quarterback of all time, or let's just say the best quarterback in the game right now, even though wide receiver 1, Tyreek Hill, for all those years, Hall of Fame tight end who doesn't age apparently, and an offensive coordinator play caller in Andy Reid, who we all have decided is one of the best in the game, maybe of all, one of the best of all time. But I can still look at it and say, okay, maybe Patrick Mahomes is probably a tier ahead of those guys. But for the other guys, it's really hard. It's really hard to separate Josh. People were like, oh, Josh Allen didn't have a great season. And you look at his numbers and it's like, they're insane. I might have voted for Josh Allen for the MVP this year if I had a vote, which is why they shouldn't give me a vote. But that's not the point. The point is, it is hard to separate these guys. So I put Lamar on the same tier as a Burrow, probably an Allen, and a Herbert, and I'm thinking Lawrence going into next season.
One good way to understand how good Mahomes is that Jimmy G also had great receiving talent, great tight end, great offensive line, and a generational offensive schemer in Kyle Shanahan. And no one's saying that he's the best quarterback in the NFL. It's one way to put it. Let's get you out of here on your pet peeve of the week.
All right, I saw this and it bothered me so much today. There was a tweet from a publication, regardless, doesn't matter which publication. And it said that CBS Sports projects blah, blah, blah in the NFL draft. They project this guy to go 1, 2, 3. I think it was Anthony Richardson. Doesn't even matter the player. That's what real clickbait is. That bothers me so much because all it was a writer on CBS.com, Chris Trapasso, a friend of mine, does really good work in the draft, doing his mock draft, not projecting anything, just doing a mock draft like we all do. And that's all it was. And it becomes this huge thing like, oh my God, CBS because you see the word CBS, even though it's CBS Sports, which is obviously very different than CBS, the network with Tony Romo and Jim Nantz. And CBS projects Anthony Richardson as the number 1 overall pick. And it's just like, we've all written mock drafts before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, we're just kind of having fun here. And that's all it was. And it became this huge deal that CBS projects Anthony Richardson. And then the other thing, which I kind of sound a little bit like an asshole here, but the other thing is just like the article in itself. The article in itself on this publication, not CBS Sports, was really just a copy paste of the mock draft without really anything else, which is obviously positive. We get that a lot of PFF, a lot of people take our stuff and then just copy paste it. It is what it is. I understand the game, but a little bit of a pet peeve of mine.
Preach, brother.
It's so good because everyone is fighting a battle to get their mock draft viewed over others. I mean, it's a battle, it's a war out there. But using the word projects like this is some sort of like political race that is dirty, man. Like, it's like CNN now projects, this candidate to win Georgia. And it's like, okay, when you say that, and that's a big deal when a network projects those things, because we had Kornacki on here before and we work with him at NBC. It's like they have a whole war room of people when they're about to call a state. They've got to like bring in like the head of the network and be like, we're going to call the state. And like, here's the deal. We have, 4 nines worth of statistical significance that is going to happen. And like, okay, we can call the state. It's like, you get it wrong. Like you may as well shut it down, right? Like no one can watch you anymore. Meanwhile, we've got, CBS projecting Anthony Richardson who might go top 10 and go number 1. It's like, nothing matters at this point. Seth, you're always my pet peeve. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And go follow Seth at PFF_Seth on the Twitter machine. He will not project anyone to go number 1 overall. You can be sure of that. Seth, thank you, brother.
See you guys.
Quick reminder that if you have not yet gotten yourself a PFF Plus subscription, now is a great time. Get a year-long subscription, pay less than $8 a month, takes you through all of free agency. You get the best free agency rankings. You get salary projections from the one and only Brad Spielberger, most plugged in guy in the entire industry. There's a reason teams are just, they have it. It's like their screensaver. They just have it up there. And you too can have that same content updated as things change on our free agency rankings. Our draft guide is now live. The first version of the draft guide will be updated throughout the draft process. Combine numbers to be coming soon, more players to be added, more advanced data on every single college player. Plus, there will be a post-draft version which will grade all of the team drafts, have projections for the upcoming season, new updated lineups. So you're getting even more with that subscription. And if you use promo code Forecast, you can get 20% off at pff.com and on the PFF app. I didn't even mention the best thing on the darn site, which is the mock draft simulator, which is now also in the app. So go to PFF, wherever it is, download the app or on the web and get yourself a PFF Plus subscription for 20% off. With all that money that you've saved, you can then make that money work for you by going to Western and Southern, our friends who have a game plan for you, no matter what your financial goals are, whether it's just to save money, whether it's to buy a house, start a family, maybe you're trying to buy some life insurance, who knows what it might be. Western and Southern Financial has a game plan that they can tailor for you. Go to westernsouthern.com/PFF and start getting your money together right now. Alrighty, our good friend Judah Fortgang at Throw the Damn Ball on Twitter, which is a football reference, and there is only one kind of football being played. It's only semi-football, and that's XFL. We're going to find out if he continues to bet on football during the offseason, or what it is that he is betting. We're going to talk a little offseason betting with Judah. Judah, how's it going, brother?
Everything's good. I will just play. Sunday came around last week, and there was just a deep hole that I felt that I don't really look forward to. But there's still.
So does that mean you didn't bet the XFL?
I did not bet the XFL.
Okay.
No,
I
downloaded a little bit of hockey stuff.
Okay.
There's no XFL.
So what does your betting portfolio? Because Brad and I were talking about this before you came on, and we were like, I mean, we'll bet on literally anything at this point. But you are maybe a little more judicious with your portfolio So like, do you go off the rails in the off season? Do you stay regimented? What does it look like?
Yeah, so take my football betting aside. I say, you know what? There's so much hold. Right, books are taking so much off the top at this point in the off season that if I really need some action, I'm gonna have to turn to betting on hockey. It would be in theory betting on the XFL, but I actually know less about the XFL than I do the NHL. And then when baseball rolls around, I'll do some baseball. Unfortunately, in New York, where I live, the draft props are not actually. I can't get stuff down. I'm sure Brad, you know this. So I will start kind of getting into that game, but there's a little bit more of a barrier than I would like. But I think kind of to bring it back, for the most part, the next basically until the draft, I won't be betting very much at all. There's way too much hold. If I need some action, I want to watch a game or something, I'll be turning to other sports.
For most of the printing press that's listening, well-educated bettors. We have new people all the time. We explain what hold means.
Yeah, so hold is basically is a fair value of every bet that you make, and it's essentially a tax or an interest that the sportsbook is taking, where all of the odds don't mathematically add up, and that number is called a hold. So let's say there'll be like 55% hold, which just means that if you added up all the fair value of all the possible bets, the book is taking 55% off the top.
Okay, so hockey. Let's get into this a little bit. I forgot that the Vegas Knights played in the NHL earlier today. I was talking to somebody about hockey, and I was like, let me see if I can guess who the best team in the Western Conference is. And I did not get it correct. Do you have your own models? What resources are you using? Are you betting tail, alt line, same game parlays? Like what's your
so I'm just diving into it. I'm building like shots on goal model right now, which I think is kind of the weakest market. But news in hockey is really paramount because lines are constantly changing, and that dictates so much of how the game is played. Right, because like who you're playing with has a lot to do with your production, and also like your time on ice is going to vary depending on who you're playing with. So reacting to news is kind of how I'm starting, because like this is really my first time diving in. To betting hockey during the season, as opposed to just like a bet here or there. But that's kind of the main focus. And I think it's like important to understand like the same process for football is not necessarily going to be the same one for hockey. And like those tail outcomes don't really exist because there are only so many goals you can score as opposed to kind of yards in a football game. But it's a new learning process, and I'm honestly excited to dive in and learn more.
So you're talking about, teammates and line mates. Are you also looking at matchups for opposing teams and how that affects the guys you're going to be looking at for some of these props?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have certain teams like, for instance, when you play against the Boston Bruins and you're going against Patrice Bergeron, George, like, what are we talking about? How have we gotten to talk about for Patrice Bergeron's defensive habits? But yes, there are certain teams like they're shutdown centers, as they're called, or shutdown defensive lines. And like those matchups definitely matter and factor in. And these are all stuff kind of trying to model and get a base for. But yes, all of those things are extremely important. And also like who's the home team and who's going to get the last change, and like is it a particular team that's going to make sure that they're matching up their best defensive line against the opposing team's offensive line. Like these are all things to factor in.
I just had to throw this in there. I wrote a 25-page sports econ paper on the effect of the long change for George. Again, if you know what we're talking about, if you're the away team, there are 2 periods in a game where your bench is further from where you're defending. Basically, your goalie is further away from you. For the home team, it only happens to you once, and it's a massive kind of edge, throughout the game. So that is what we're talking about right now.
I know who Patrice Bergeron is. Okay,
good.
I had no idea what the long change was. That seems awesome, and it's a great like home ice advantage, which I believe is what it's called. So I have a good friend who bets on the NFL, doesn't know a ton about it. I mean, knows plenty about it, but like relatively, that's not his sport. Bets a ton on hockey, and has talked about the softness of those markets. I'm curious, Judah, like, because I noticed this with other sports. I noticed this in particular with Formula One, where like clearly the book is just not investing as much in creating sharp lines, and there's not as much flow into those markets. So there's opportunity to find value there. Are you seeing that with hockey, and like to what extent is it the type of thing, because you mentioned like, considering, who's on the ice, matchups, building shots on goal model, like, are those things that you think are not baked in to the lines in the books? How soft are they?
Yeah, I think the best example is live odds that I found, that basically the books are just going to stick with their initial line no matter what, not really adjusting to how the game is being played, right? If a certain team is like absolutely dominating in the first period, the score is nothing though, because they happen to have not scored on any of their goals. The line is just going to be a reflection of the pregame line. And that I found has been a huge source of value. I haven't again, like, 6 weeks from now, as I've had a lot more time to kind of dive in, I think I'll have better answers on like the different markets as I kind of do my thing and go into all these alternate markets. But that's something I found right off the bat, that like I got like the Avalanche like 10-1 on Sunday, down 4-2. It was just like a reflection of the pregame line.
I actually realized I explained that poorly. It's just the second period for both teams, not a home field advantage thing. But where you're further away from your bench. But we're not going to dive extensively into.
Let's do 30 minutes on this.
Yeah, let's dive into it. But no, it's funny because football is kind of a general question for you. Again, the Judah, like, there obviously, I think, are more independent variables in football than maybe any other sport. But, unlike a baseball or a basketball, like, I think hockey, would you agree, is probably the closest we can get to where, like, so many other things are impacting what you're doing that you can't really just dominate or control what you're doing like you can in baseball, basketball, other sports like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I'd also just add, like, the nature of the game is so different. That's like important to understand, which is like there are only going to be so many goal events, right? Like there are, average of like 5.5, 6 goals. And like, yes, you can find, like, again, shots on goal is like, that's a market where you can actually get a bunch of shots in a game. And that's where, there's opportunity for real tails. And that's why I'm kind of focusing on that in my initial modeling. But like the nature of the game is very different, and you kind of need to have a new approach. And I think it kind of adds to your whole, being a better across multiple sports, kind of understanding the ins and outs of different games and applying and understanding where sports differ.
Also,
it feels similar.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it seems similar to soccer.
Yeah, right. We're like, you're talking about X goals, and like there are fewer. Like, they track scoring chances in the NHL. I think it's kind of subjective to a degree, but basically, like, what is a quality actual chance at scoring versus just like kind of a shot on goal? Right. I was gonna say the last thing is there's nothing more exciting than the puck line in the NHL because of when you pull the goalie at the end of the game, and if the team you bet on is up 1, but you have -1.5, and you're trying to get an empty netter, that is maybe one of the best thrills in betting, is trying to hit that puck line.
Absolutely, that's the absolute. I've been on both sides of that. There's nothing quite like it. There was something else I wanted to say. That's okay.
It's okay. We're already at our max time for hockey talk on this podcast. I had I've been searching for things. Formula One is starting to heat up. This will become a Formula One podcast in just about a week or so as I start to ramp up there, and it would just be to your guys' benefit. But I was thinking about March Madness, and I was actually talking to someone earlier today, and they have a group of friends that play in something called the Jerome. Have you guys heard of this? I kind of thought, Brad, you might have, but what it is basically March Madness, but for the conference tournaments. And what I thought was cool about that is I always go into March Madness like going, I've got to learn about 65 teams I know nothing about. And like, this would be a way of like, you do some of that learning, you are incentivized to watch these conference championships, which, by the way, ESPN jams down your throat. Like you're dying for these, right? And like in reality, you're like, this is awful basketball. Like this is the XFL of basketball. It's terrible. But if you had that March Madness feel to it, it might actually help you for then betting on the tournament. So throwing it out there, I'm thinking it could be a cool thing to get the printing press Discord involved in. Open to all ideas, but
I got to check that out. So it's like a pool or a bracket structure, but just for the conference tournaments before the actual big dance. Okay,
exactly. And you play them all. And so, it's like you're invested in a bunch. You can do I didn't read the entire thing yet, but essentially like you get extra points for like lower seeds winning.
Okay. Yep.
There's some Calcutta-ishness to it, right? It's across all the different conference tournaments.
Love that. I have done that model for the tournament. I think it is more fun than just making a bracket, is where you get like more points for picking upsets and stuff like that. I think that is the better approach than just doing a standard bracket.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, playing a Calcutta would be like probably the best way if you have a smaller group, or you don't have, hundreds of people, because, just get more money into things, and you have more ways to win, right? By picking up, teams that are poor, and you get more differentiation, right? So many people pick the same national champion. It's like kind of boring.
Yep.
Judah, you mentioned draft props. It's hard to get money down on draft props. I have heard of people literally driving around states like to get money down on draft props. Is that something like, are you considering that? Do you want to join our traveling circus?
I should. In past years, I've had my little plants, across the country who are able to, play stuff for me. I haven't done anything yet. I'm not even sure. I think they might be legal in New Jersey. In which case,
I'll come pick you up. I'll come pick you up. We'll go to Jersey. That's what I was going to say.
Perfect.
That sound like a plan?
Little known fact. Yeah. When 2 years ago, I was living in Washington Heights, which is like right next to the George Washington Bridge. And I would walk across to New Jersey to place bets before it was legal. And there was like a New York Times article like about the bikers who would, on Sunday mornings go across the GW. And I was like, that's my spot. Like I used to sit there and place NFL bets. So maybe I just need to throw back to that for some draft props.
I love that.
Well, there's a will, there is a quay. I would like to remind our if people don't get that reference, then I'm not going to explain it. You just have to live through it. This draft season, we will make there a quay, and that then you'll be in on the joke, and it'll be great. Some interesting stuff from the draft, by the way, is Daniel Jeremiah put out a mock draft which had Tyree Wilson going ahead of Will Anderson Jr. We Brad, myself, and Arjun, Judah, we were kind of predicting different picks, and the one that I actually was predicting was that the Cardinals would take an edge defender and they'd take Will Anderson Jr. Certainly people were surprised by Tyree Wilson being ahead of Will Anderson Jr. And it was interesting. What Jeremiah basically said was like, look, he's got ridiculous traits. He's going to have like 7'3" wingspan. He's going to run like 4.5, and teams have different ways that they pick players. And I actually thought that was a really interesting way, that maybe the market isn't taking into account, is just understanding the front office and what they have done in the past, either by position or the way that they've drafted. And so I don't know if that's something that you buy with the Cardinals. They obviously have a new group there, but I wanted to run that by you, Brad.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing there is Will Anderson is currently listed at 243 pounds. He did play like 4i and like he slid inside in Alabama, but Tyree Wilson's like all of 275, 280. So I think it's truly a, what kind of front do you use? What kind of build do you want? And I think that is a market inefficiency, and people just see, hey, flashy name, good player at a big school, but don't think of like how much these coaches want a guy they can mold and all these things. Also, just wanted to mention, speaking of some movement and some interesting things, this is before, Seth mentioned Chris Trapasso, his buddy, our buddy, putting out his mock draft with Anthony Richardson first. Before that came out, he went from plus 10,000 100 to 1 to 7 to 1 to go first overall. The buzz on Anthony Richardson is very, very real, because again, he is the guy where if you aren't sold on Bryce Young just because your concern is, he's 5'10", 185 pounds soaking wet, like if that's your main concern and you want to take the traitsy, toolsy, this guy could be a freak show, that is Anthony Richardson in this draft class, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah. Wow. That's a big move.
Big time.
It's a serious move.
My Twitter feed has just been videos of Anthony Richardson for what that's worth. I've seen it anecdotally, just like where my Twitter feed goes, the odds tend to move. I don't know if it's worth anything, but
that's really valuable insight. Can you just let us know
right.
what your Twitter feed
Absolutely.
looks like?
I'll just exactly.
We'll create a Twitter list that's just the people you follow, and we'll be sure. My Twitter feed is just tons of garbage threads. And then the other day, I actually opened on accident a tweet that then unfurled into like a 4,000 word article. And this was the first time where I was like, damn it, Elon, what are we doing here? It hadn't really impacted me until that point.
Thankfully, you can just not click the see more. Like I thought it was just going to have it where it was just this massive thing. But yeah, if you're someone who has blue, just don't tweet that long. Just pretend the limit's still there for the rest of us, please.
Can I see less? Can I get that option?
Yeah. Well,
like if someone's posting that, if someone's posting that content, is there a way that I can just like ban it from my timeline? Like I didn't think there's something worse than Twitter threads, but there are.
Oh, there is.
Yeah. That's enough Twitter talk for today. But interesting thing about Anthony Richardson, when we were preparing for that last podcast, I kept taking him inside the top 10 and thought, am I reaching? And maybe a little bit of that is looking back to last year, and people are going to have a little bit of PTSD on, people had Malik Willis going number 2 overall. I mean, now it looks ridiculous to even consider him in the second round. Based on how he performed. So maybe that's a little bit of the challenges people are thinking back to last year and that recency bias.
I think it's a great point. I think there is going to be some kind of, overcorrection to, we tried to just force players to go in the first round of that position because they always seem to. I think last year was a bit of an anomaly. But yeah, it's a fair point. And maybe there is some value on, I know right now it's 4.5. It would be, of course, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, and then probably Tanner McKee, who I know our guy Mike Renner is very high on, and I think has had some conversations with people that are very high on. Maybe eventually there is value on, like, everyone is afraid of last year happening, and he does sneak into the bottom of the first round, and you get some value on it because everyone's reacting to even though the draft classes kind of don't really correlate with each other much at all, to a degree, I guess, but not really.
No, that's a good point. Tanner McKee, you can read all about him in the PFF draft guide. I forgot that he was in the draft class till I picked up the draft guide and read all of Mike Renner's words. It is one of the best pieces of content that is out across the entire year, across all the different places that put out NFL content. It's truly a cut above. I always forget like how much of an edge charting every single player on every single play is in college until you get to draft season. You're like, oh my God, like, people's analysis on a lot of these college players is just absolutely made up and pathetic. But you don't have to be one of those people. Go to pff.com, get yourself a draft guide. Judah, any hockey picks or bets that we need to know about for this upcoming weekend?
Ooh, for this weekend? No, I think there's some value on the Devils to win the Metropolitan Division. Carolina's winning a bunch of one-score games. The Devils have some great underlying metrics. I think they were plus 450 last I saw. That would be my bet. And as a Ranger fan, that kills me to say. But
okay, I used to play like NHL Live 98, and I thought the Devils jerseys were sick. And
Scott Stevens, dude, laying the lumber. Oh.
Yeah. And then my mom thought it was like a devil worshiping game or something like that. So, back in the good old days, at least she didn't smash the CD. Like when she heard that I was listening to the Eminem show, like my entire CD player turned into smithereens. So, better than nothing. Devils plus 450 to win the Metropolitan Division. What is this? This is Harry Potter. Thank you for the knowledge, Judah. It's always a blast. We will chat with you next week. Brad, as usual, brother. Appreciate you. We'll see you. Peace.